Hello and welcome back, traveler. Here is the next part of our story about Taco, the Wizard of Legend. Taco did not fall so much as descend through the folds of reality, his robe trailing shadows across dimensions that flickered like candle flames in a hurricane. Wherever his foot touched, the world adjusted, terrain that wasn't there before, suddenly forming to meet him. He walked through valleys that had never existed, spoke to winds that remembered the first fire, and listened to the humming of time beginning to forget its own name. The vault had changed him. Not in power, he had always had more than enough of that, but in presence. He no longer felt like a man. He didn't even feel like a wizard. He felt like a question that no longer needed an answer. The world had grown louder. Not in sound, but in intent. The trees whispered to him in syllables once known only to druids who had drowned themselves in root water. Mountains shifted ever so slightly when he passed, just enough to accommodate the silence that followed him. Animals stopped and watched, not in fear, but in understanding. Something had been stirred, and everything knew. There were more vaults. Of course there were. He had known it from the moment he touched the first box. They weren't singular containers. They were fragments, pieces of a design long buried beneath the bones of time. And now that one had opened, others were beginning to pulse. He could feel their hum beneath his thoughts, like buried bells chiming in forgotten rhythms. He began collecting names. Not people, asterisk names star. Lost names. True names. The kinds that could split rivers or awaken old machines. He carved them into the inside of his mind with spells etched in silver thought. He carried them not as weapons, but as warnings. Tools for what was to come. He met others along the way. A boy who had been touched by the dreaming plague, eyes constantly shifting between futures, his voice speaking riddles that bent reality for miles. Taco gave him a lullaby to sleep for the first time in a decade. A woman who lived in a field of swords, each blade representing a moment of betrayal. She offered him tea made from regret. He drank it and thanked her for her honesty. A beast the size of a cathedral, its mouth stitched shut with divine silk. It bowed to Taco and gave him a tooth carved from prophecy. He used it as a quill. But the closer he came to the second vault, the stranger the world became. Time unspooled in places. In one town, he watched a family be born, age, and die over breakfast. In another, laughter from children echoed long before they arrived. Entire cities had vanished into mirrors, their reflections still performing mundane daily rituals while their real selves screamed silently in glass prisons. And in the center of it all, the second vault. It was buried beneath a mountain that did not exist on any map. Not because it was hidden, but because it had never been drawn. The cartographers who tried found their ink turned to smoke, their maps rearranging themselves at night. It wasn't just a place, it was an absence. Taco climbed it anyway. There was no path, but the wind remembered his weight and gave him handholds. Stones rearranged in his wake. He spoke once, just once, and the entrance opened. Inside was darkness that had aged beyond black. The kind of dark that had grown wise, gone silent, and then started dreaming. It knew he was there. It welcomed him like a long-lost twin. The second vault wasn't a structure. It was a mind. He stepped inside, and it remembered him. The rush was immediate. He saw his own death, 7 versions of it. One where he drowned in ink while reciting a forgotten god's funeral rite. One where he allowed himself to become a tree and rooted for eternity. One where he faced the girl with morning-colored eyes and smiled as she unmade him. He kept walking. The vault whispered in voices that came from beneath his skin. They spoke of bargains made in silence. Of truths traded for beauty. Of hunger not for food, but for existence. He answered with silence. And in that silence, he found her. The girl. She stood in the center of the vault, no longer a student. No longer a girl. A woman now, cloaked in light woven from other realms. Her staff pulsed with the same sigils she had drawn in the dirt long ago. But her eyes, They were older than his now. "Taco," she said. Not like a question. Like a farewell. He stepped closer. "You've seen more than I have." "Yes." "Are you still you?" "More than ever," she replied. "And less." He nodded. "That's how it begins." She didn't argue. Instead, she lifted her staff and pointed to the vault's heart, an orb, smaller than the first, glowing not with malice, but with sadness. "It isn't a prison," she said. "It's a womb." Taco understood instantly. The first vault had held something old. But this one held something new. Something becoming. "You came to kill it?" he asked. She shook her head. "To guide it. But it's listening to everything. Including us." "What will it become?" "That depends on what we show it." He stepped beside her. They watched the orb pulse. "I don't know what I am anymore," she whispered. "You are the next question," Taco said. They touched the orb together. And the world screamed, not in fear, but in birth. Colors erupted that had no name. Emotions passed through the ground, turning rock into feeling. Time paused to take a breath. The orb cracked, and from within emerged something not yet formed, a swirling mass of potential. It reached for them. Not with arms, but with hope. They didn't resist. Instead, they gave it everything. Their memories. Their regrets. Their joy. Their mistakes. Their laughter. The entity shuddered, spun, and changed. It became a star. A new light in the world. A vault opened forward. They stood together, watching as the light faded into the sky. "It will change everything," she said. "Yes," Taco replied. "Now we just have to survive what comes next." They did not speak again for some time. The star born from the vault's heart still hung in the heavens, though it no longer blazed. Now it shimmered faintly like a candle at the edge of the universe, unseen by most eyes, but ever present in the patterns of fate. Its light touched the ground in places known only to seers and fools, and the world began to lean subtly toward it, as if even the wind desired to know what it meant. Taco and the woman, his student, his successor, his equal, left the mountain together. Neither of them walked. The ground moved beneath them in recognition, adjusting to their presence like parchment shifting for the pen. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked, not looking at him. "I don't know what right means anymore," Taco replied. "But it was the necessary thing." They descended into a valley where shadows slept. Trees with white bark and translucent leaves formed a silent forest, each bough cradling motes of memory drifting through the branches like pollen. Taco stepped through one and blinked as someone else's childhood washed over him, a boy learning to dance on rooftops in a city that had not yet been built. "The vaults are connecting," the woman said quietly. "The more we awaken them, the more this reality thins." "Yes," Taco said. "Because this world is no longer the only one we are speaking to." They reached a shrine built entirely of bones, not human, not beast, but something old and crystalline. The bones shimmered faintly with forgotten names. A priest waited for them there, blind and barefoot, eyes covered in golden wax. He bowed once, deeply. "You are the architect," he said to Taco. "I am a wanderer," Taco replied. "You carry the pulse of vault light. You will find the gate of return." Taco studied the man. "There is no return. Only forward." The priest smiled. "Not for you. But for those who come after." The woman turned to Taco, startled. "You knew about this?" "I suspected," he said. She stepped back. "You didn't tell me." "Because if I had," Taco said, "you would have walked a different path." "And now," he said, "you walk with purpose." The priest offered them a drink, liquid thought poured into cups made from silence. They drank. Reality tilted. They awoke in the future. The world was cracked but thriving. Cities hovered above oceans that sang lullabies. People had learned to shape dreams into tools. The air carried melodies that whispered truths instead of lies. But Tako knew the cost. Every vault opened had left a fracture. Not in the world, but in possibility. The more they chose to move forward, the more other futures curled inward and died. The entity born of the second vault had not meant to harm, but its mere presence was rebalancing what it meant to exist. And something had noticed. They felt it first in the sky. A ripple. A tremor of doubt passed through stars that had burned since the beginning. Tako looked up and saw a new shape coalescing, no longer a star, but an eye. And not a watching eye, but a remembering one. "It's found us," he whispered. She looked at him, her face suddenly small and human again. "What is it?" "The judge," he said. "They didn't run. Running was for mortals. They prepared. They found a city made of glass feathers and set to work. The people there were artists of memory. They helped weave a construct of pure intent, a sanctuary not built to withstand attack, but to channel truth. The woman, the one once called a girl, sat in the center and wrote her story into the air, letting it curl like incense into the sky. Tako built around her. Glyphs. Wards. Runes that bent time and looped it into protective spirals. And still the eye grew. When it finally opened fully, the world remembered everything. Every mistake. Every betrayal. Every broken promise. People began collapsing under the weight of their own history. Tako stood between the eye and the city. He called upon every name he had learned. He spoke the truths hidden in songs, in tombs, in forgotten children's rhymes. He gave himself again, layer after layer, memory after memory. But this time, it wasn't enough. The judge was not a creature. It was not a god. It was the consequence. And it had come to ask the only question that mattered. Should you have existed? Tako faltered. For the first time in decades, he had no answer. But the woman did. She rose from the circle, burning not with power, but with understanding. She walked barefoot into the light of judgment and whispered her story. Not just the words, but the emotions, the choices, the weight of living. And the eye blinked. The world paused. And then the judge vanished. Not defeated. Satisfied. The people wept. Not from sorrow, but from relief. The woman returned to Tako's side. He was fading. She could see it in the way his shadow no longer obeyed the sun. "I'm not done yet," he said, voice rasping. "You can rest. There's one more vault." "Where?" "In me." And with that, he vanished. Not into death, but into the echo. His form broke apart into threads of spell-woven memory, drifting skyward, embedding themselves into the star he had helped birth. The woman did not cry. She walked into the next morning alone. But she carried his name in her breath. And the vaults were no longer locked. They listened. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more content like this. Hope you have a great day. Until next time, traveler.